All right, we're back again. This is the It's My Turn podcast with Myron Turner. I am your host, Myron Turner. Really excited to have this topic and this guest on the podcast because this topic is near and dear to my heart with my own story. And also, I know a lot of people can relate to this topic so much so that it's just kind of hard to speak on for the most part. Is really tough to even to get into it. So today's topic is loving yourself. So the name of this podcast is It's My Turn to Love Myself. And that is a mouthful, as you can imagine, just thinking about the content of that. So today, um, I, we have Tim on the show. He has been schooling me on how to say his surname, but
Yeah,
I'm gonna
that's right.
I'm
I'll
gonna
I'll
butcher
be
it again, Tim.
I'll
Please,
I'll pay you a kindness. It's Wiesehan. So yeah,
Wiesehan,
yeah. So
Tim
and
Wiesehan.
yeah, and so yeah, just a little bit about me. I'm a husband and a father. I work in IT. That wasn't always my career. For several years, I was a debt collector, so had a bit of a
Oh
color
wow.
past. But yeah, so and moved from the U.S. To New Zealand about 12 and a half years ago. And yeah, so it's been really good.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to the show officially, Tim.
Thank you.
And first of all, I thank you. Now, I've heard your story,
Mm,
but these people have not. So,
yeah.
um, you guys are amazing. Oh, by the way, just before we get into it, I just want to say I am in the infancy stages of this podcast, but it's already picking up some momentum. Um, in New Zealand, I think that's probably the good bulk of my listeners in New Zealand. So, hats off to you guys in New Zealand. Thank you. But there's a few people in the UK who are listening. There's also a few people in South Africa that are listening. I really appreciate you guys, and also a few people back home in my home country, America, which is also where Tim is from. He forgot to mention that.
Yep.
He is red, white, and blue like me, and we're very proud Americans. Even though we do live in New Zealand, we're very proud. We're loud and proud about being
Yes.
American.
Yep.
American. We're Eagles. All
American.
right. American. We're American, So we won't talk politics. That's another podcast
Yeah.
in itself.
And
That's
there could
another.
be trauma with that too. So
Yeah, 100%. YouTube will flag you right away as soon as you say
yes.
as soon as you say anything about Trump or anything like. It's just like,
Mm,
oh, okay, well, this guy.
yes.
But yeah, 100%. Yeah, welcome, and
Yeah.
yeah, let's get right into it, man. So, who is Tim? And you know, with that, and you already given us a little background, but along with the basic background, tell us who you are for the list. I know who you are.
Mm,
I go to church with him. He's a great guy,
yeah.
great husband, leader. But for the people who don't know you, want to introduce yourself to our digital audience, and let's just segue into your story of not feeling connected, not feeling loved.
Yes. Yeah. So, yeah, who I am now, I would say I'm mostly a whole person. There's still some stuff that's coming up. Still some stuff that gets revealed to me where there's little areas of brokenness that I still need a bit of healing in. But there's been so much that has been healed in me, and I would say that I'm a very caring person. I think probably mercy is one of the strongest characteristics that runs strongest with me, and that pretty well defines me, and so makes me very tenderhearted. Which that was a bit of a struggle, especially as a guy. You're not supposed to be tenderhearted. You're supposed to be all, rough and tough. Rub some dirt on it, and she'll be right. But that was never me. But so yeah, for me, I struggled a huge amount with loving myself. I would say I did not love myself for a lot of years, and there were quite a few things that figured into that. One of them was just being born premature. I was very sick. My first 2 years of my life, I spent probably 18 months in the hospital. So a lot of isolation because back then you didn't have visitation like you have now, where the parents can be there and be present in that. Um, and so, even though there wasn't a choice in the matter, my mom had no choice in the fact that she could not be there. I still felt abandoned, and abandonment and rejection were things that were really paramount in my life, and very defining to my life. And then On top of that, my biological father was a very abusive man. My earliest memory was him beating my mother. I was maybe 2 years old, and I remember that.
Wow.
And that, yeah, that really shaped me too, as far as the world feeling unsafe, and particularly that men were unsafe. Now, when my mom got married about a year and a half later to the man who then adopted me and my older brother when I was 7, and has been a wonderful father figure to me, has been amazing. I'm hoping to be as good of a father to my daughter as he was to me and my brother,
Okay.
because he's been amazing. But that trauma was still there. That damage and yeah, that trauma was still very much there. And so there was always that thing, and so I stopped seeing my biological father when I was 7. But I never had one time that he said one affirming word to me, not once in my life. And then even later on, when I reconnected with him as an adult, he never had anything affirming to say to me. Never once told me he loved me. And so that just added to the feeling of feeling abandoned and rejection and feeling worthless. And so you carry that. And so,
Yeah.
that's kind
Yeah.
of how you see yourself then. And my mom was wonderful. My mom was great. My mom would say affirming stuff and all that. But you need that. Sorry, from a guy's perspective, and knowing now down the road, you need that from your father. You really do. There's just no two ways about it. You need that from your father, and I did not get that. And getting it from my dad who adopted me was good, but it wasn't the same.
Wasn't enough, maybe? Would you say that?
I would say it probably wasn't enough because there was still that thing in me going, no, that even though you want to receive it and you're desperate to receive it, there's still that part of you going, no, it's not safe because if I receive it, then I open myself up and men are unsafe, and so he'll just end up hurting me worse. I think that's kind of what you carry.
So
So
you
yeah,
were wrestling with the idea that men were unsafe.
yeah, absolutely. My whole life. It's only been in the last, wow, probably in the last, I would say probably the last 14 years that really changed. Um, and up until that time, yeah, and I'm 61 now, so that's a long time of feeling that way.
Man,
I wouldn't voice it. I wasn't aware of it. You don't, you don't have that awareness growing up.
no, you don't. No.
But because of that expectation of being rejected and that expectation that you'll be abandoned, I didn't make friendships very easily.
Mm.
I struggled in school. I was bullied a fair amount. So I never made very many friends. I would make a couple of close friends, but for the most part, I didn't make friends. And even with those friends that I would say back then I was close to, I wasn't really. I couldn't be honest with them. I couldn't be honest with myself as far as who I was. And so, even coming into young adulthood, I had this horrific self-image that I was worthless, that I was, um, lazy, that I was stupid, all these things, this self-dialogue that was going on, and it was incessant. It was all the time. And so, I walked around, and I became a Christian when I was 18, and that was great. That was life-changing for me in some ways, but the self-talk, the self-image stuff didn't change with that.
Yeah, because those are deeply rooted neural pathways that you actually
Yes.
need to. It takes time to rewire. Like when you think about the extension cords in the home.
Mhm.
I'm always shocked at how tangled they
Mm.
get. It's almost like someone sitting there and purposely tying knots, but actually that's a clear picture of how our minds are. Like
Mm.
the psychological pathways, the neural pathways that get hardwired in us at a young age. I think they say from the ages of 1 through 5, I believe 1 through 5.
Mm.
Somebody is that's like some critical hardwiring stages there from one through
Yeah.
five,
The
and
first
then
3 years are the biggest, the most crucial, but yeah, the first 5 are huge
the
and
first
very
three.
defining.
But you said something about the first three. You
Mhm.
said something about being in a hospital or something. Did you say that?
Yes. Yeah, by the time I was, 2 years old, I had pneumonia 12 times.
What?
Yep, and every time they would tell my mom that I wasn't going to survive, and every time she would pray and I would survive.
12 times.
Yes,
Okay,
by the time I
okay.
was 2.
By the time you were 2, you
Mhm.
had pneumonia 12 times.
Yes. 12 separate instances of pneumonia.
Okay, I gotta ask, was there something wrong with the housing? What was
No, it
going
was
on there?
just my very, very compromised immune system because I was very, very premature. I was well, for that time, now it's nothing, to be born as premature as I was now, babies survive that very, very it's rare that they wouldn't. But back then, premature babies, they it was an uphill struggle, to survive. And I actually initially lost birth weight. And when they first brought me to my mother, because she had an epidural, and so when they first brought me to her, I was very oxygen deprived, and she thought I was black. She's like, "That's not my baby." So,
Your mom
yeah.
said, I ain't sleeping with no black dude, so I don't know who that is.
Yeah, so, yes. So, yeah, I spent the majority of my first 2 years in the hospital, and so in that time of isolation, you feel, well, they've abandoned me. You just draw that
Jesus.
conclusion.
So this has
Uh,
been a constant uphill battle for um,
a
survival
long, yeah,
and
absolutely.
validation.
Yes,
I just want to exist.
yes,
Can I exist physically and emotionally? I just want to
yeah,
exist and not
yeah,
get in it. Man, that's deep.
yeah. And that whole internal dialogue that you've got on of, if anybody knows who I really am, they won't want anything to do with me.
Okay,
And I
you
carried
gotta
that for
slice into
a lot
that.
of years.
You gotta slice
Yeah,
into that.
just that thing, just our humanity. It's like if somebody sees my weaknesses, particularly, if somebody sees your best stuff, you always put on your best face for
Of
people.
course.
We all do it to a degree. I try and live more honestly now, and try be more aware, self-aware to start with, but also aware just when I'm presenting to people that I'm being pretty upfront and honest. But there's still those places where socially you've got to put on a mask. It's part of what we do.
Part of culture, yeah.
But yeah, so for me, it was always fake it. Most kids that I went to school with, connecting with them years later, are like, oh, we always thought you were so happy, and I wasn't. I was absolutely miserable. I would say probably the two things that were defining of my life during that time, even till, like I said, maybe 14, 15 years ago,
Mm, mm.
was fear and despair. Those were just constant. I would have panic attacks, especially if I went into a big public space. I was sure that people were looking at me in not in a good way, that people were looking at me like to judge me. And I would have flat out panic attacks.
So
Um,
you keep mentioning this 14-year point. So obviously something huge and pivotal happened
Yeah,
14 years
there
back.
were yeah, and it was a bit before that, because there was when I was 21, and I've shared this with you, but the listeners won't know. When I was 21, I got sick, from a mosquito bite of all things, and I spent the next 16 years physically and mentally disabled. So that had a big impact. That really shattered any confidence I had in myself. At that point, was completely shattered. By the
Wait.
time I
Okay.
reached the end of that. So, yeah, sorry.
Did you say mosquito bite?
Yes, yeah, I got viral encephalitis, which you get from a mosquito bite. So, yes,
Viral
yes,
encephalitis from a mosquito bite.
yeah, it makes your brain swell up. And in 3 days, I lost 35 pounds of muscle mass. I can
What?
actually afford to lose 35 pounds now, but back then, yeah, I went from 160 pounds to 125 pounds in 3 days. Yeah, and I was in the best shape of my life, but had I not been, I probably would there would have been long-term consequences. I mean, there were, but, more severe than what there were. But yeah, I spent 16 years physically and mentally disabled, became very suicidal. Um, they found one of the things they found was that they finally discovered the damage that was done from the swelling in the brain, and got me on a couple of medications. And one was that my thyroid gland was damaged, and so it was producing at a lower level. And when your thyroid gland produces at a lower level, one of the things it causes is severe depression. amongst the physical effects, but mentally it causes severe depression. And so, yeah, like I I ended up at one point checking myself into a mental hospital because I was to the point where I had planned out exactly how I was going to end my life. And because I felt life was just too painful. Wasn't that I wanted to die, I just couldn't stand to live with so much emotional pain.
Oh my gosh, that just hit me so hard.
Mm,
I'm gonna repeat it. It
yeah,
wasn't that you wanted to die, it's that you couldn't stand to live.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah. So the getting on that medication made a massive difference to my life, physically and mentally. It recovered my mental faculties because I had during the midst of that, actually more towards the end of that, I had gotten tested out as mental. They did an IQ test, and I tested out as mentally retarded.
Hmm.
So I tested it with an IQ of 75. So that was pretty crushing. But there was also
Man.
relief in that too because I'd spent so long sick and we couldn't make sense of it because they're like, you should be better. You should be back to, you should be holding down a job and having a career and da da da. And I wasn't able to. I would go to bed and I'd sleep for 12 hours. And when I got up, I was just as tired as when I went to bed. So,
My
and
God.
yeah, so it was a grueling, grueling
Was the
time.
sickness eating your brain cells or something? Or
No, it caused swelling in the brain, and then there was damage that was caused because of that, and it damaged my thyroid gland. And the other thing that they found out is it destroyed my pituitary gland, which regulates your immune response and all sorts of things. So they got me
man,
on.
something was trying to kill you.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. And that wasn't the last time. There was there was one more time after that. And that
What?
kind of leads into the time of what happened that really turned things around so that I was able to love myself. This is back in 2008. In 2001, I had gotten married to my first wife. And anyhow, it was like or 2000 I had gotten married. 2001, the doctors discovered the issue physiologically with me and got me on the medications that sorted that out. So it took care of the physical thing, it took care of the mental faculties, that sort of thing. But anyhow, 2008, I was working and I was doing debt collecting. I was actually really good at it. I didn't like who I was when I did it, but I
Of
was very,
course.
very good at it.
Of course, yeah.
Um, and you say things to people that you would never say to them face to face.
What are
You
you
know,
saying to people, Tim?
Oh,
Give me
well, the probably the worst example, the most shameful example, I had this lady who ran this daycare, and she kept telling me that she had mailed the check. Well, the check would never turn up, so I'd call her again the following week, and oh yeah, I mailed the check. No, no. So this went on for over a month, like every week. I mailed the check. So finally, I called her, and then she wouldn't answer my calls. So after about 2 more weeks after that, I left a message on her voicemail and said, "Well, I hope you take better care of your daycare kids than you do your debt with us, so they'll be looking like emaciated Ethiopian refugees." Yeah, probably not my best choice.
and you kept your job after that?
Yeah, yeah, I did. She called us up and cursed me up one side and down the other and paid me over the phone.
Man,
Yes. Yeah. So,
you
yeah.
crossed the line, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Big time.
You didn't cross the line.
Yeah. So anyhow, 2008, I was doing the debt collecting, and I got sick. And the thing was, I had been getting sick all the time for all those years. People normally you get a cold a couple days later, you're up and right as rain. If I got a cold, I'd be in bed for a week. During that time. And so I got sick again. I'm like, okay. So I called up work, and I hadn't called up work for ages. I'm like, I think I've got the flu or whatever. And so went to the doctor. They gave me some antibiotics. They're like, we think you've got a virus. So sent me home. And the next day was worse. My equilibrium was gone. I couldn't take more than 3 to 4 steps without falling over. Like up was down, left was right. I couldn't walk. I was falling down. I was vomiting.
Yeah.
It was really not good. And finally, after about the 12th time that day, I fell down, and my wife said, "You're going to the hospital." And it wasn't a question, it was a statement of
Mm.
fact. So I'm like, okay, she managed to get me dressed and get me in the car. And then the next thing I know, we're at the hospital, and I have audible memory of her saying, "We're at the hospital. Should I call your parents?" And me saying yes. The next thing I know, I came to, and it was about 5 hours later, and they were putting a main line in my jugular because it was the only vein they could find, and I had a pulse of 12 beats per minute, and they were getting ready to use the paddles on me. And so they're like, "Do you want us to do everything we can to save your life?" I'm like, "Yeah, let's go ahead and do that."
Mm-mm.
And I was very, very close to death for probably the first 4 days. I was very close. It was very touch and go. I knew I was very close. Yeah, I just
What's the age at this point?
I would have been 42. So yeah, I knew I was extremely close to death. People, and it can be different religions, but people talk about like angels singing over us and that. I actually heard it. I was that close. I was like,
You
I
heard
don't know.
angels
People,
singing.
yeah, I heard angels singing because I've never heard worship music like that before or since. Was like nothing I'd ever heard
So you
before.
definitely was out here.
Yeah, I was on.
You
Yeah,
was
I
you had
was.
already one foot on the
Yes.
other side. You was,
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, and I had the thing was I had such amazing peace about it. I was like, okay, cool. I felt bad for my wife and for my parents that I was going to, leave them behind.
yeah.
But I was calm, like, okay, I'm ready to go. So, but anyhow, then they got me on an experimental medication because I qualified because I wasn't having enough. It turned out I had septic shock. I had pneumonia, a urinary tract infection. I had septic shock. And septic shock is where your blood becomes poisonous and it actually starts shutting down all your organs.
Tim,
And
what
that's,
the man? What the
yeah.
man? I
And,
swear, bro. If they don't make a movie about your life, yeah, I swear. If we, I know
yeah.
the Avengers got a new movie coming out. They need to do your movie next.
Oh,
Um,
man.
it's
Yeah.
it's this is crazy.
Yeah. It was pretty profound. And then I spent a total of 8 days in the hospital. And then basically the doctors were saying, "We want you to stay." And I'm like, "Well, is there any reason medically I need to stay?" And they're like, "No." I'm like, "Okay, I'm going home then." So they released me from the hospital. A few days later, I got a call from this lady. She was with
Right.
this drug company, and she's like, "We've had a hard time getting a hold of you. You're supposed to be in hospital." I'm like, "Well, I'm not. I'm at home." She's like, "Well, we need you to come into the office now and talk to us." Apparently, they were not supposed to release me until that day that she called me. And I'm like, "Well, I'm sorry, I can't." She's like, "Why not?" And I said, "Because I'm going to work." And I thought she was going to fall out of her chair because she did not expect that. Because you
Mm,
don't, you don't, you don't recover like that from septic shock. It just
no,
doesn't happen. I don't have an explanation for it other than God.
it must
That's
have been
that's
God.
my explanation. Yeah,
It's clearly a God thing.
yeah. Um, anyhow, so it took me probably a month to gain my strength back.
Hmm.
And then just at the point where I started feeling really good again, my wife got sick. And so, um, anyhow, she ended up with septic shock as well. We got out of the hospital, waiting in the waiting room. And then after about 45 minutes, it felt like an eternity, but after about 45 minutes, they came and got me. And as they walked me to the door of her room, she flatlined.
Oh
And
man.
I crumpled. I just hit my knees. I just and so they had a chaplain come and get me and walk me back to a place. And so they did CPR on her, and it took them 10 minutes to bring her back, but they did revive her.
Oh, they brought it back.
Um, yeah. But anyhow, long story short, she got diagnosed, and it wasn't until um, it would have been May. She got diagnosed with cancer, and she passed away like 16 days later. It
Man.
was very quick. There were signs. We were concerned because she had been losing weight in that not in a normal way,
Oh, she had
nothing.
it for a
But
long
yeah,
time.
she
She just
she
didn't.
had it for a while, and so my yeah, I told her she should go to the doctor, but she would play it off. Um, yeah, but her death was crushing. There was no other way to put it. It made me really examine myself, my identity, because you lose your friend, you lose your spouse, your social circles radically change. And so that process through grief is a dark one.
Yeah.
for the most part, I went through it pretty well. Other than it was, actually, she died on June 22nd. December 22nd, Christmas coming up, and just before Christmas, normally I'm like, yeah, put up the tree, put up decorations, put the Christmas music on. I wanted nothing to do with Christmas because it was just reminding me that I was alone and feeding into that whole thing of abandonment again, you know? So yeah. And then, like 3 days before Christmas, I went out in cold weather, Illinois. It's freezing cold. So normally I'd go out in the garage, open the garage door, start the car, let it warm up for, 5-10 minutes, and then drive to
Yep.
work. Well, I went out in the garage. Um, I got in the car. I didn't open the garage door. I started the car, and it ran for probably easily 5 minutes, where I was trying to decide whether I wanted to live or not.
Mm.
It was a very conscious thing. I wasn't aware. It was just I felt despair, and that's the only way to describe it. I have a faith, and I believed I knew where she was. I still believe that, but it still didn't assuage the anguish I was going through at that time of the grief. So anyhow, went to work that day, came home, and that night I literally cried myself to sleep. And I'm weeping and I'm praying. I'm going, please, God, please. And the next morning, and this is going to sound weird, but whatever it was, what it actually was, I woke up and I heard music, and then I realized it was me singing. Like I woke up singing. I didn't even realize I was singing at first. And with that, it was like something had broken. And so I was able to go on and celebrate Christmas with my family and have a good Christmas, actually. So it was really, really powerful.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
Wow.
yeah, so it was probably maybe 9 months after that a friend of mine recommended I read this book by John Eldridge called Wild at Heart. And it's very much about who we're called to be as men. Um, and it was through that book that I really got challenged with loving myself, and my identity. And as I started really delving into that and drilling into that, um, I started recognizing that I actually was lovable
Wow.
and started accepting that. Yeah, and it was huge, and it was gradual. It wasn't, that doesn't change.
I was just
That
gonna
doesn't
ask you
change
that because the
all at
person that's
once.
listening to this, who they see the title of this podcast and they may be listening to this show for the first time,
Mhm.
maybe looking for a remedy. The reason why I made
Yeah.
this show is because most people can't afford mental health care,
Yes.
even if they had the confidence and the gumption to
Yeah.
say, "Yep, I'm gonna go ahead and do some psychology or some
Mm.
help mentally therapy." They can't afford it, and you get smack dab, hit in the face with that price. So I
Yeah.
guess my heart is for, when people will hear stories like yours, like they can actually hear something they can take home for free. So
Absolutely.
what would you say after everything you've been through? What would you say would be like a pivotal point? I know you say it was over time,
Mm.
but was it maybe at least a few key points over that time period that you can pinpoint to
Yeah.
say this is where I decided to love
It
myself?
was yeah, it was that moment of recognizing. The first one was that moment of recognizing that I actually was lovable and I actually had good qualities because
Recognizing that you are lovable.
yeah, and that I had good qualities. Because people would go, "Oh, name 3 good things about yourself," and I'd go for really surfacey stuff that was easy to, because I couldn't believe it otherwise. I couldn't receive it. People'd say nice things about me, and there was always that deflection of, externally, I'd be like, "Oh, thank you," but internally it was going, "Yeah, no, I didn't
Yeah.
believe it." And so I started actually believing those things about myself. And the other thing was that started changing for me, and I had to be really intentional about this. And so, for anybody out there that's listening, that's going through this, it's not going to be easy. It's not. But like one of the things I had to do was change my thought life because the way that I thought about myself was terrible.
Mm,
Maybe a couple of hundred times a day, thoughts would come at me about you're worthless, you're useless, you're lazy, you're this and that. And so I had to be very intentional to go no, to every time that those thoughts would come, every time I would have to go, "No, that's not who I am. This is who I am." And I would have to, mentally state to myself who I actually was.
mm,
And it, it didn't change straight away. It took a while, but eventually that started shifting. And I no longer have that terrible thought life.
It sounds like you're talking about neuroplasticity. Dr. Caroline Leaf
Mm,
talks about this a lot. Um, I read her book, that was the first time I learned about neuroplasticity and how you can actually rewire your mind.
hmm
You can rewire it. It's not easy
Yes.
and it's
No,
not quick.
no.
However, if you are persistent and
hmm
you keep at it and you keep challenging those negative thought patterns, Tim did it, I
Yep.
did it. You
Yes.
can do it. And these are core thought patterns. These are
Absolutely.
things that are causing core issues in their life, especially for someone who may be dealing with substance abuse. This is the core of the substance abuse issue.
Mhm.
It's not the substance itself. It's
No.
this core thought pattern that you believe that something is wrong about you, or you may not believe that you are enough, or you may not believe that you are lovable. I love when you said you started to believe that you are lovable and you have qualities about you that are lovable. That
Mhm.
is a huge turning point, and that's what this podcast is all about, trying to figure out
Yeah.
when you give yourself permission to change, give yourself permission to think differently, and that is
Yeah.
powerful, man.
Yeah.
That's so powerful. I did, man, this is so good. Like I see, I'm actually blown away. I always joke around and say it's hard to make me speechless, but you've done it for sure. um so much so that I need to just go back to the notes that I have written down. So
Yeah.
what would be the practical steps that you're doing to keep this up? So you talked about what you've done to get there. What are some of the mental structures that are set in place to keep this up
Yeah.
practically?
So, like for me, meditative prayer is a big essential practice.
Hmm.
To go through and when there are those negative things that crop up, to go through and go, is that actually true or is that a lie?
You got to
Okay, that's a
challenge it.
lie.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So that standing guard at your mind. You've got to guard because nobody else can do that for you. Nobody can guard your mind for you. You've got to guard it for yourself. So yeah, standing guard. I would say you need to find, if you can get counseling, that's fantastic. But you need to find somebody too that you can go to and go, hey, this is what I'm walking through, and somebody that will stand alongside you with that. So choose wisely in who you do that with, because not everybody is worthy of your trust. But choose wisely who you can trust, and that person that you can share those things with, that'll help encourage you in your journey.
Hmm. And what would you say to someone who, I guess, I guess the question is, what do you think someone should do to truly love themselves after they've gone through a life of trauma like you have? You've gone through a whole life. It wasn't just one isolated event. It was a
No, no,
series of
it was a
series of
yes,
events,
a
physically and
plethora.
emotionally. Yeah,
Yeah,
plethora of
absolutely.
physically and emotionally you've gone through and you overcome. So I definitely applaud you for
Mm,
overcoming those things. Well,
thank you.
what would you say to someone who I mean, who's in a similar situation? What do you think they should do to truly love themselves after they've gone through? Because I got a few people just off the top of my head I can think
Mm,
of who similar story, maybe not as intense, but definitely
mm,
similar story. They maybe have not found themselves in a car trying to commit suicide in a car, but they may
mhm.
have found themselves contemplating suicide, jumping off top of a building, contemplating
Yeah.
suicide with pills. Like what?
Mm,
Because I'm sure there's got to be at least one person listening to this who's dealing with the suicidal thinking this
yes.
week.
Yeah.
So what would you say to them?
So the first thing I would tell you is it can get better, and it
Hmm.
has for me. Like, fear and despair used to define my life. They were always around me. There was no getting away from it. It felt pretty inescapable, and I would say neither one of those in any way define who I am now at all. I would say I'm very much at peace with who I am. I very much like who I am, and that's a huge one. And I would say I have hope, and you can too. I would say the first thing is not accepting the things that have happened to you, but also the trauma that happened to you is what's happened to you, but it's not who you are.
Hmm.
And so just learning to recognize, and it may be really hard, but start with one or two things that you can recognize in yourself and go, yeah, I actually can love that, and start with that and build from there.
Hmm. It's powerful. Just flipping that question on the flip
Mm,
side. So trauma and things happening to you from the outside is one thing. So then you're a victim. But
Hmm.
what do you do? Years ago, I had a young guy in church who he was just a kid and he was struggling to love himself because he's carrying his guilt, always guilty, always feeling bad about
Oh
himself, and I
yeah.
just couldn't figure out what it was. Then he confessed to me that he actually has killed a few
Mm,
people.
mm,
And he told me he's killed people, and I was like, man,
mm.
God still will accept you.
Yes.
But what would you say to that person who's dealing with guilt? It may not be something as dramatic as murder,
Yeah.
but what
Yeah.
would you do?
I
Um,
well,
yeah,
and this actually, because we hadn't really gotten a chance to address this, but I carried a massive amount of guilt and shame. I was probably in my mid-20s, so it was when I after I'd gotten sick with the encephalitis, that I came to find out that I was actually conceived through rape. Um, my biological father and my mom were married, but it was rape. It was not consensual, and that was like a millstone. And so my already bad self-image went from bad to worse. And so
finding out
I
you were
carried this.
conceived from rape.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so, the enemy comes along and whispers in your ear, all you are is a painful reminder
your
of who,
mistake.
yeah, of, the trauma that was done to your mother,
Yeah.
and you accept that because it was in such a low point.
Mm,
And so, for me, it was really a God moment. But, of, because it was something that I prayed about, and I would ask for help, but nothing seemed to shift. And they had this moment of prayer when I just felt God specifically speaking to that area of my life. If you're walking around with guilt and shame, you don't have to carry that. You can put that down. You may have made some bad choices. You may have caused some harm to others or to
mm.
yourself, but you don't have to carry that. You can be forgiven and you can forgive yourself.
That's I just something just popped into my head about abortions
Mm,
because there's a lot of youth that struggle with guilt of
yeah.
over that as well,
Mm,
and they lock themselves in that, and they consider themselves to be unworthy of love because of what
yeah.
they've done to their own babies.
Mm,
Um, yeah,
yeah.
it just came up when
Yeah.
you were talking about
Yep.
the conception thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say, if that's something you journey through, know that you can be forgiven for that. Know that you can recover from that. That it's not something that has to haunt you the rest of your life. I have a few friends who have gone through and had abortions, and they've talked to me about it, and they've talked to me about their struggle with the guilt and the shame and that they felt about that. And you know, and they've come out the other side of that. So I would just encourage you that you can come out
Mm,
the other side of that. You don't have to carry that. You don't have to keep
mm,
dragging that
mm,
huge boulder that is holding you back from being who you're really meant and purposed to be.
mm. So one of the things I used to do sales training a while back, and one of the things I used to tell people when I was doing sales training was why do you struggle? I used to ask them, why do you struggle on the phone? And they would say, oh, look, I'm afraid and with rejection and this and
Mm,
that. And I was like, let me ask you a question. Do you like you?
mhm.
I always ask that question. I
Yeah,
always ask that question. Do
yeah,
you like you? Because people who don't like themselves,
mhm,
or even on a deeper scale, don't love themselves,
uh-huh,
struggle to talk to complete strangers. That is really what it comes down to. Like you said, that
yeah,
core belief, because in your mind, you're thinking, I'm being a burden presenting
uh-huh,
myself to these people.
mm,
But once I learned to love myself, I then flipped that on its head and I was like, I'm going to add so much value to every room I walk into,
absolutely.
and it just changes the narrative, and it's like, oh, now I like myself. So I guess the moral of the story is Tim likes Tim now, and Tim loves
Absolutely.
Tim now.
Yes.
Tim would
Yeah.
hang out with Tim if
Yeah,
you cloned yourself.
absolutely.
You actually would,
Yep.
you would hang out with yourself because
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be
Tim
fun.
likes you. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things I try and do too is, if I run into people, and you do, and some people are pretty, they're too guarded to really be honest. But the people who are honest, and admit that they really struggle with that, I try and make sure and let them know that they are lovable.
Come
Because
on.
I know what that
Yeah.
journey is. And so, yeah. So if you're watching this and you think, yeah, and you feel disqualified. You're like, yeah, that maybe everybody else, but not me.
Not me.
No,
Yeah.
it's you too.
You
You are
too.
lovable.
You are lovable. You are
Yep.
lovable.
Yep.
Talking to you.
Yes.
You know who you are. Yeah, you are lovable. Well, Tim, look, do you have any closing comments that you would like the listeners to hear? I think you've definitely laid it all out. I'm serious about wanting to see a movie about your life. I would
Yeah.
definitely pledge to that or raise money towards that. It
Nice.
needs to happen.
Maybe a project. But
That man,
yes.
I'm telling you, man, like
Yeah.
that would be such a good movie.
Mm.
Harrison Ford, get all over that. Harrison Ford, one of his last movies before he passes away.
Mm. Yes.
He's getting up there now, but I think
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely. So
he would do it well, or maybe no, not a Harrison Ford, maybe
maybe.
somebody else a little bit younger who can carry the weight. I
Yeah.
don't know. Maybe a Leonardo
Wasn't.
DiCaprio type thing.
Yeah. It could be. Yeah, I mean, he's got a similar hair pattern to me, so that might
Yeah,
work.
Leo can pull it off. Leo can pull it
But
off, man.
yeah. So just parting thoughts. Don't allow yourself to continue to be robbed by not loving and embracing who you are. That's it.
Hmm. Beautifully said. Well, like I don't need to add anything else to that. This has been the It's My Turn podcast with your host Myron Turner. And Tim, I can't thank you enough for just
Mm,
sharing like everything. I think you
mm.
have told me a story before, but I think every time I hear it, I hear something I didn't hear the first
Yeah.
time.
There's a little bit to
So
unpack there. Yeah.
yeah, it's like a lasagna. There's layers of truth in that. So it's just powerful, man. So thank you so much, and yeah, we'll see you guys on the next episode.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.